Hello, so before I show the process of rescuing my godmother's orchids, I'd like to actually give a little bit of background why she asked me to help her, and I'd like to show my collection of orchids, and to be exact, my mom's collection, because she was the person who introduced me to this beautiful flower and who asked me to buy her first orchid 5 years ago. Obviously, I was a student and I didn't have any place in my apartment to place any orchids and to look after them, but I really wanted my mum's dream to come true, and I started opening up a lot of information about them. So I'm going to show one of my recent orchids, and I'm going to show that first orchids that are actually immensely beautiful at the moment. My mum loves her orchids so much that she even created baskets for them, and those baskets are so adorable. Unfortunately, with all of the planting and sowing season, she doesn't have a lot of place on her windowsill, so those baskets, they were a kind of a very nice alternative to occupying the whole place on her windowsill, and I will show the way she's put them and arranged them. So what I'm doing with the orchids all the time when I want to buy a variety that I really like, so I basically buy the orchid which is about to die. That's the way I try to reduce on the cost of the orchids, because they cost a lot here, and also I kind of really adore saving them, so I always look at the orchids and I feel so sorry for them that I really want to help them. That is the first orchid that I ever bought, my mum, and it was actually dying at that moment. Unfortunately, I don't have any photos of it, but look at how vigorous it is at the moment, and that is the basket I'm talking about. So she creates this very high baskets so that to give the possibility of, like, small orchids to stand near, because these ones, they are just crazy. Look at this gorgeous thing. And that is actually one of the colors my mom adores. She really loves orchids of vibrant colors. That definitely brings this pop-up look, especially when it's really wintry and cold outside, as it is right now, because they are blooming during winter and they produce a lot of happiness. Then I have this one. I think that is actually the first. That orchid was the second that I bought, but it was in a span of one and the same year. And that's also really gorgeous. And another basket for it. Oh, look at this, really tiny detail. Of course, comparing to that one, I think that there is the difference in their variety, because it didn't produce like a lot of leaves, but it blooms also extremely nice. And of course, right now, it's about to lose its blossom, but usually it blooms for 3 or 4 months. I always say that these orchids, they actually love my mum because they feel so safe and so vigorous just living next to her, because that's another living being in her apartment. And this orchid is actually a surprise, because I bought it in blue color and only afterwards I realized that there are no blue orchids, and that was a kind of a paint or pigment that they added, and it turned out to be white. But look at the size of the flowers. At that moment we didn't have any white orchids, so my mom was actually happy to get a white orchid. And it's also pretty vigorous, and the baskets are smaller. So my mom makes these baskets from newspaper. So at the moment when I bought blue orchid, I still didn't know that it was white, and I was looking for some colors that I didn't have, that my mom didn't have, and I bought a yellow and a white one. So right now she has 2 white orchids. So that's the second one. I would say that these are the recent ones. I mean, like, they're not as old as the ones that I bought 5 years ago. So if I remember correctly, I bought them 2 years ago, but they're vigorous too at the moment. So when you couple them up, they create a very stunning picture, and it looks like, it's one orchid that is blooming. All other orchids that I have, they are not blooming, but I would just briefly show them. So that's another one which is of old varieties, but the blossom is not very nice right now. So last year the blossom was just tremendously beautiful, and this year it's just starting its blossom. And also I've got this one that I bought last year just for the pop-up of this color, because my mom mostly has this light color, and she really wanted a vibrant one, so that's the thing. And again, all of them were dying. I don't buy really vigorous and healthy plants. I buy dying plants, I replant them, and I use all of the really nice things that they love, and then they provide this incredible growth. But unfortunately it has only 2 flowers, because my mom accidentally damaged this flower spike. And this one too. So I think that's the old one, because my mom wants to have a baby orchid, but unfortunately we don't have it. 2 weeks ago I bought actually a mini orchid for my mom too. She really wanted a mini one because she doesn't have a lot of space. And as you can see, after I replanted it and took care of it, it gave a new leaf, though it was in the section of dying orchids and you could buy it at half of the price. And it gave a new leaf and produced some roots, and it looks like this. It's a tiny one. I really loved it, and I think it's a very good alternative for a person who loves orchids but doesn't have a lot of space. So seeing all of these vigorous orchids here, she obviously wanted us to help her. That's why we arranged the day when we're going to meet, and I'm going to help those orchids. So the destiny of them will be revealed after tea, because it actually takes time for them to revive, especially if they are as damaged as my godmother's. And unfortunately, my godmother is a type of a person in this respect who buys orchids and who doesn't actually look after them. So she just enjoys the blossom, because no matter how striving for life they can be, but over some period of time they eventually can die. But during this very short span of their life, she is enjoying the blossom. And I think from all of the orchids that she bought, she lost more than half of them, and it's really sad. And I was listening to her stories all the time, and I eventually decided to come and help her. Of course, I'm not a rescuer. I can have some unsuccessful attempts at rescuing the orchids, but I will try my best. So I studied all of them, and eventually I'm heading to her house, and we're going to have a very nice time together with her and her orchids. Look at how crazy my mom's windowsill at the moment. So that's what I was talking about. So basically these baskets, they help her to arrange the space that way that she can fit in a lot more orchids at the same time. Just look at this tiny space, but here we have 5 huge adult orchids, and they bloom so beautifully. So, and also that what I was saying, when I couple up these 2 white orchids, they create a very romantic picture. And that is the space for all of my experiments, which I'm going to share later on. And we are trying to clear the space for sowing season. The top shelf is for smaller orchids. Of course, they are not mini ones, but they still fit in. And this is mini version. That's why I started buying them, because they can fit in, and she still can enjoy her one of the most beloved flowers. And yeah, another one. So I didn't show the ones that are still small, but these are the ones that I'm reviving at the moment. See you there in a second. And so I'm at my godmother's, and these are the orchids that I'm going to rescue. So the problem with them basically is that, first of all, my godmother didn't look at planting them into bigger containers when they were growing their roots. So most of the roots that are in the old substrate are actually gone, and all of them have spots of some kind of fungal infection on their leaves. But slowly, every orchid loses 1 leaf at a time, not being able to grow them back quickly. I'm going to start with the one which is actually the worst of all of them, even though the blossom is really gorgeous, but I need to remove this flower spike, and there is, I think, only one leaf that is going to remain, and the roots, I don't think there is anything live here, but I'm obviously going to check. The only thing that I'm happy about is the roots that are going to appear. So one of the first important steps is to get the orchid out of the old pot. Obviously, it's not a very easy thing if there are a lot of roots and they're all intertwined around the pot. Removing the flower spike, I always try to leave a small bump, and I always disinfect the cut too, since flower spikes are not dried. At one hand, you can see a lot of roots, but most of them aren't supporting the health system of the orchid, so I decided to remove the majority of them, and since they are very intertwined, it's going to be very hard to get to the root neck of the orchid and check how healthy it is. In reality, that is what is left from this orchid: one healthy leaf and a couple of healthy roots. And the next step is to put it into a fungicide, which is like this red mixture, since the leaves have black spots in them. Even though it is the worst of all of the orchids, but to be completely honest, it is still a very healthy thing. There are roots and the root neck is okay. The only thing is for the fungicide to do its thing. So I soak it into the mixture for 10-15 minutes while I'm working on the rest of them. The second orchid had literally the same picture, so there wasn't anything different from it. Again, all of the roots were intertwined, they weren't working for the orchid, and the root neck was completely rotten exactly in the point where all of the roots are coming from. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to remove the bottom of the root neck that is connecting this big ball of roots, and I'm going to clear the remaining part of the root neck from these hard shells, and underneath we're going to see some healthy roots that are going to be fresh and new for this orchid. This orchid appears to have a big mass of healthy leaves, which is actually good, and there are a lot of small roots that are going to support the health of this orchid. And in order to remove the hard shells, I use a pair of tweezers. It's very easy to remove everything, since they block a good portion of healthy roots. In order to grow the roots, the orchid should remain in humid conditions. What I personally do all the time is I take the bark and I put my orchids into the bark and just spray them every day with water, supporting these humid conditions, especially during the winter. In this situation with my godmother's orchids, it was a bit different since there weren't a lot of roots remaining. So I was looking for coconut chips that are very nice to grow roots in. But I accidentally ordered coconut substrate, which is a completely different thing. So the only thing I could work with is actually with the substrate, which is good on the one hand since it provides this kind of humidity, but you need to be really careful with it because you need to adjust to the schedule of watering the orchids. And I mix it in with clay pellets, which is also really important for letting the air in. So you always work with what you have at hand, but me personally, I always prefer to work with bark. It is going to be a big test on the coconut substrate. Another thing that I did with the damaged parts of the leaves of the orchids is that I didn't want to remove them completely since there aren't many leaves left on the orchid, but I cut the part which was infected by this fungus. I disinfected the cuts and I've put the orchid completely, soaking the leaves too. And I repeated all of the steps with all the orchids. Obviously, while doing all of it, I just enjoyed how beautiful these orchids are and the immense amount of color that they gave, especially since they were dying. They were trying to give the lost flowers. My godmother gathered all of the flower spikes that I removed from the orchids and created a kind of a bouquet of orchids and put everything in a vase with water. So that is the end result. As you can see, the picture is not very appealing and pretty scary. I'm not sure about the destiny of all of them, but I've tried my best. And I dealt with the damaged leaves and I dealt with the damaged roots. And obviously the soil and the mixture that I've prepared is not the best, since I'm really pressed for time and I've tried to take the resources that I've got at hand. So these are the orchids. I hope that they are going to survive. At the moment they actually look nice, even though the picture is dreadful, but I'm sure that everything is not damaged and they are pretty healthy, and I hope they will get better. And in the time I'm going to give an update later on. Of course it will take time, I don't know how much time, but I suppose 3 or even like 3 months or half a year or even a year, since they were extremely damaged. But right now that's what we've got.